Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Callie and happy February. So with it being February, I really wanted to do a romance book recommendation video. So I have a stack of 10 different books with 10 different tropes, just in some of my favorite books that deal with those tropes. So without further ado, the first one that I have is The Heart Principle by Helen Hoang. Helen Hoang is probably one of my favorite. I'm probably gonna say that about every single one of these authors. I love every single one of these authors and their writing styles. Helen Huang write really well done representation for people on the autism spectrum as well as mental health. So in The Heart Principle, I would say that this has probably one of the best mental health, toxic family resolutions as well as disability representation within this story. It is a beautiful love story, as well as a story about finding yourself and who you really are. And I sobbed while reading actually a lot. Anything by Helen Huang is phenomenal. This is the third book in her Kiss Quotient series. Obviously each one following a different character, but they all kind of mix and mingle together. The next trope that I have is rivals to lovers with Kiss Me Cupcake by Helen Hunting. This follows two rival small business owners. We have our female main character who owns a boozy cupcake store, and a guy right next door owns an axe throwing bar, and they are both up for best small business in the town, but they end up having to team up to prevent this, essentially like a Dave and Buster's, from opening across the street and ruining all the small businesses in the area, including their own. And this is just cute, fluffy. I loved the atmosphere of the, not quite a small town, but the small business aspect of it, and them being rivals is just, it was hysterical. The next trope that I have is probably one of my favorites and one of the more underrated ones, and that is friends to lovers. So this is Take a Hint, Dani Brown by Talia Hibbert. This follows an accidental romance as well as friends. The two main characters end up having this viral video go out with them of him carrying her out of a burning building, and they quickly become friends, and then obviously romance ensues. I really like this because we see the relationship from start to, not quite finish, but like from the very beginning, and it's really, really cute how the friendship blossoms and then you see the romance blossom. I love all of the Brown sister books, but I think Take a Hint, Dani Brown was my favorite of all three, just because of how cute and how just non-observant the female main character was. I love a girl in books who has no idea. No idea. It's hysterical to me and I love it every time. Up next, I have Second Chance Romance, and that I picked Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. This is a not childhood romance, but young love romance that was destroyed by an event that happens, which you find out later in the book. You find out how their relationship crumbled. This is also done in a dual timeline, so you see their relationship progress when they were teenagers as well as when they reconcile as adults. And I believe it's like a 10-year difference from when the bad thing happened to when they are now. And I loved it. It was so poignant, so well written. I love the dual timeline aspect, and I loved seeing the two different relationships bloom for this couple. It was just fascinating and really well executed. And I'm not a huge fan of second chance romance, only because if they broke up the first time, there was a reason. And there's gotta be a lot of different layers for me to really enjoy that second chance and having it need to be needed. Next trope I have isn't really like, I don't know, I guess it's a trope, and that is the two different worlds trope. So we have a city girl who is an ER doctor who her car breaks down in the middle of the road in the middle of nowhere, and this guy who is a small town, not quite like a farmer, but he lives in a small town and he works in the small town, ends up finding her and helping her out, takes her back to the small town, and they start to kind of develop this really fun, cutesy friendship. She ends up driving through this small town more often than she actually anticipated, and he goes to the city more often than he anticipated. And it's a really cool juxtaposition of the two different worlds colliding. What I loved about this is they were so upfront with their differences and figuring out ways to make the relationship work despite that. Usually with tropes like these where there are two different worlds, they don't recognize it and then it's just thrown out the window to make the happily ever after work. This actually had those trials and tribulations of making a relationship when you come from two different worlds work well, and I really loved how the author made that happen within this story. Up next is a really huge, again, not necessarily a trope, but subgenre within the romance, and that is sports romance. I think this is definitely one of my favorite sports romance. Kulti by Mariana Zapata. This is also probably the only slow burn that I have within this pile. Maybe not. I don't really know. But this is the definition of a slow burn. We are following Sal, who is a rising female soccer star, and then Kulti, who is a retired professional soccer player who comes to coach on her team. Now, she has been obsessed with Kulti since she was a kid. There is a bit of an age gap, but everyone's legal and fine. I think she's like 26 in this book. He's in his early 40s? I want to say early 40s. I'm not terribly sure. But there's an age gap. But I loved how just slow and steady that this went. There was a lot of the soccer, which I didn't really anticipate liking so much. I know the rules of soccer, but I've never really followed the professional sport at all. And I ended up, while I was rooting for the romance the entire time, I was almost rooting for Sal's soccer career through most of the book because I wanted her to succeed, and I think that is a tribute to the fantastic writing that Mariana Zapata has within this book. And I know that this isn't one of her like top books. This is the only one I've read, and as you can see, I've tabbed the crap out of it. And I'm obsessed. I go back and read passages all the time just because I love them just so much. So much love for this story. This one, again, not necessarily a trope, but a subgenre, is the out in the middle of nowhere. It is very similar to Part of Your World, where it is two different worlds. We have a girl from Toronto, Canada, who ends up going to the middle of nowhere, Alaska, to meet her dad. I think why I picked this one out on its own is because that out in the wilderness, we get almost in enemies to lovers, different worlds, as well as a reconciliation between father and daughter. This is the father's, I don't want to say best friend, but he's the closest thing to a best friend that her dad has. And I just love how the relationship develops within this story. We go from enemies to friends to lovers. What I also really like about this is a whole series. There are 3 books following Calla and Jonah's story. There is a 4th book in the series which follows a different couple, but we get more than just that happily ever after that happens at the end of this book. We get more into the story, and it becomes really real, and it shows, similar to like Part of Your World, it shows that trials and tribulations that relationships have to go through, especially long distance, because she's from Toronto and he lives in Alaska. So I really enjoyed all this story had to offer with those aspects within the story. Speaking of best friend, I have the brother's best friend trope, and my favorite is Twisted Love by Anna Huang. I'm obsessed with Anna Huang. I love all of her books. They're fantastic. This almost borderlines dark romance. We have Ava. She ends up getting stuck in the rain and unable to get home, and her brother is out of town, so she calls her brother's best friend Alex, who comes to pick her up, and everything just goes on from there. And it's full of secrets and lots of really good plot twists within this story, and all of the other twisted stories are phenomenal as well. I adored everything about this series. My favorite in the series is Twisted Lies, but that one, it's not brother's best friend. This is definitely my favorite brother's best friend story. It's fantastic, full of pining, groveling, fantastic romance, fantastic smut, a fantastic story. The next trope that I have is everyone's favorite, which is enemies to lovers, and I picked Dating Dr. Dill by Nisha Sharma. I love this. We're following these 2 very stubborn people who are just do not hit it off at all. They have a weird run-in and she finds out he lied to her just to kind of get by. They have a really crappy date and just end up hating each other. But they end up having to fake it because he is on a show and he is known as like the heart doctor on this show. And in order to boost his ratings, and watch time, he gets captured on video with her, and then it placates her family who are pressuring her to find a husband and settle down, and she kind of wants nothing to do with it. She does want to find someone, but she doesn't want to do it for her family. She wants to do it for herself. And I just adored the banter, the sass, the stubbornness. You could feel the electric energy between these two every time they fought, and it was beautifully done and executed on every single page. One of my favorite things in romance is when we have a female character who is extremely empowered and extremely smart. She is not the ditzy girl who just falls in love with the first billionaire she comes across. And a lot of romance, since a lot of romance is written by women, we get a lot more of that within the genre. But one of my favorite smart girl shows up boy is Love on the Brain by Hazelwood. This is another Rivals to Lovers, but it also has the secret identity trope within it, which is one of my all-time favorites, as well as the pining forever trope, which, again, one of my absolute favorites. We are following Levi and B, who have been rivals since grad school, according to B, and they end up having to work on this project for NASA, and they have to be in close quarters, at close proximity, and everything that B knows starts to kind of unravel about Levi. Levi is one of my favorite book guys, and he's just overall very sweet. He has a cat, that like an elderly cat that he takes care of. So sweet, so adorable. As much as I love a dark, broody male main character, the sweetheart cinnamon rolls are also top tier and are slept on a little bit sometimes. So highly recommend this one. It's a STEMinist, and I just adore that genre that Hazelwood has just taken over. These are just some of my favorite romances that I would recommend reading in the month of February because of Valentine's Day and the season of love and all that fun stuff. But I have so many romances that I just love to read. I think I read a romance like every week at least. It quickly became one of my new favorite genres. I also really love the fantasy romances where we're in a fantasy world, but it's also reads like a contemporary romance, just in a world with dragons and magic. So I love the genre, and I love exploring new tropes, new authors all the time. And yeah, so that's going to be it for today's video. Please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. We post videos every Wednesday and Friday, and I'll see you guys in our next video. Bye!